Welcome to the Igniting Change podcast. My name is Duncan Cook, founder of Three-Sided Cube, trusted technology partner for some world-changing organizations. We know the power that technology has to have a positive impact on people's lives. But on this podcast, myself and my co-hosts Puff and Sophie are out to meet the people behind the technology, hear their stories and understand what drives them, and hopefully inspire others to join the mission and do some good in the world. All right, guys. So really good to meet you, both John and Jed. Do you want to introduce yourselves and then give us a bit of a background of your organisation and then why we're here today?
Yeah, so my name is John MacKay. I work at the British Geological Survey, which is essentially an independent geoscience institute. So we support government research, UK industry, and essentially what we do is we provide impartial scientific expertise on things, pretty much anything related to the rocks beneath our feet. So anything geological. So it could be like geohazards, like landslides, floods, earthquakes, water supply and hazards, so particularly floods and droughts, and that's what a lot of my work focuses on. Energy and decarbonisation, so we've got experts on carbon capture and storage and geothermal energy. I could probably go on and on talking about all the different things that we work on. But BGS consists primarily of geoscientists, and that includes me. I'm a hydrogeologist, which means I study the water, the movement of water through rocks underneath our feet. And that's water that we use for drinking, water we use for industry. It's water that sustains really important biodiversities. And I guess paradoxically, it's also a water that can be a real hazard to us. It can cause flooding, which is one of the kind of key focuses of the work that I do. I guess my particular area of expertise is around developing and applying computer models to help us forecast what's going to happen to our water resources now and in the future. So the types of questions that I'm generally trying to answer are things like, how much water can we easily pull out of the ground for drinking without impacting our environment? Or it might be something like, what is going to happen to droughts in the future as the climate warms? Are we going to see more severe droughts and more severe water shortages? And it might also be something around properties and how many properties are at risk of flooding in the future as the climate warms. So lots of different kind of questions, all related to water and sort of associated hazards. And then I'd just say our role on this project, well, I mean, Jed's probably going to introduce the project in a bit more detail, but we are essentially one of many parts, I think it's fair to say, Jed. So we're really providing the sort of the kind of computer modeling expertise that goes into this early warning system that I'm sure Jed will talk about in a bit more detail.
Awesome. And like that's a huge area that you cover. Have you?
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing more and more of these kind of events, right? We're seeing flooding increasing. We're seeing lots of kind of effects of climate change. How have you? I don't know how long you've been in that area, but has that team grown, and the areas that you've had to look into grown? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of an area that just continues to grow. I guess as we're starting to see some of the potential impacts of climate change, and it does really feel like now we are starting to see some of those impacts. It's just kind of pushing it further and further up the agenda, really. So yeah, there's a big demand really for really understanding what we might face in the future. And for me personally, it's the work is around water supply and water resources, but certainly from government and from industry, there's a real interest and sort of prioritization towards looking at climate change now. So it's definitely it's kind of an area that's I think only going to expand as we go into this sort of increasingly warm climate.
Yeah, for sure. And Jed, do you want to introduce yourself and your organisation and really the project, I guess?
Yeah, thanks, Duncan. Yeah, hi, Jed Ramsey. So I lead Project Groundwater and I work for Buckinghamshire Council. The Project Groundwater, I mean, it touches on a few things that John mentioned there, which is why, of course, he's working really closely with us on it. But essentially, Project Groundwater is looking at groundwater flooding. So you can kind of split flooding into its different sources. So flooding from, say, rivers, from the sea, flooding from surface water, which is like when drains get overwhelmed, and then you've got flooding from groundwater, which is when the water that's held in rock, essentially underground, when that rises, the water table rises and then comes to the surface and can cause flooding that way. And typically groundwater is, I mean, John touched on it a little bit there, it's a source of water as a resource. So we use groundwater massively for drinking water, although generally we are trying to use it a bit less as time goes on, but for various ecological reasons. But this is the kind of flip side to that resource. So where you've got certain types of rock, principally chalk or limestone in England, they have the ability to hold a lot of water. And the interesting part perhaps is how, well, there's kind of two interesting elements. One is the climate change, which I think we could come back to, because it does, the forecasts around climate change and groundwater flooding are a bit thin on the ground. There isn't really a consensus or agreement about the way we're going. We'd like to do some more work, and we actually are starting a bit on that at the moment. But then groundwater flooding, like compared to every other type of flooding in England, is basically, it's at the bottom of the list. So it's barely understood. It's not mapped. It's not modelled very well. There's patchy, if any, flood warning systems for it. And then can you do anything about it? Can you use nature-based solutions? Could you defend your property using property flood resilience measures? All these things, there's either nothing about them, or there's very tiny little bits done, or there's hardly any information. So it's always been left as like the too difficult to deal with and regarded as, I guess it's kind of a bit invisible because it never makes the news. You know, like water table comes up slowly, stays up for a few weeks, and then goes back down, right? It's not like a torrential downpour and then, you know, like in some of the previous jobs I've done where, you know, you go and get stand on the River Thames and you're on ITV News talking about it. It doesn't have that appeal. So it's not really in the public consciousness in the same way. But I do feel that's changing, and that's what Project Groundwater is really totally about. It's about trying to use innovative ways to deal with all these issues and then get that rolled out wider across the country. So and get things changed at a national level as well, so that we deal with it better as a country.
Yeah, super interesting. And like you say, it's not as visible, right? I mean, it's just absolutely not as visible. And prior to kind of working with you guys, I had no idea really about this at all. I didn't really understand that it was a thing. So talk to us a bit more around Project Groundwater and how you're going about this project and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, it's fundamentally a partnership project, and it's funded primarily by DEFRA and well funded. And it's part of an overall programme of around 200 million of innovation and projects in coastal and flooding field. And I've been working in flooding for 25 years. I'm going to say over 20 years. And I've never seen a program of projects like this. I've never worked on a project with this much freedom to try new ideas and risk failing. You know, this genuinely in flood risk management, we're risk averse, as you might imagine, right? You can't be making mistakes and trying things that don't work when you're talking about flooding. But here we do have a chance to try new ideas. So, I mean, to drill perhaps a bit a level down onto the work we're doing with yourselves and with John and with Jacobs, the other technical partner. There's the three partners working on this. So we're looking at flood warning here in this element. And at the moment, if you live next to a river, there's a really good system in place run primarily by the Environment Agency, really good monitoring of river levels, rainfall. They've got models that run. They've got forecasters that work in centres. They've got people who then manually issue all these flood warnings all over the country. And if you live in one of these flood risk areas, it's a good service. It's all free. It's all there, and it's reliable, and it's proven technology that's been in place for quite many years now. That doesn't exist for groundwater flooding. There's some alerts in some places. There's There's some bits of the Environment Agency do it. There's a guy down in Wessex who does a really good service, but it's basically him doing it manually, right? Because he's passionate about it. But what we are going to develop, we're quite far way along now, aren't we? Is something that's, I hesitate to use the word AI because I don't think actually the bit that they've labelled AI is actually AI, but it's reasonably clever software that will automate the process. I mean, that's the idea, to take out the manualness of it. So to have automated monitoring of groundwater levels to a frequency that gives us enough data so we know when it's coming up. At the moment, that's patchy. There's bits that are, but we want to improve that. And then to have the models that run without a huge amount of human intervention, and then to be able to make a decision to issue the warning without the need for a huge amount of human intervention, which is what happens under the current system that the EA have. It's fairly manual comparatively to what we want to do here, what we are doing. John's bit is quite interesting because he's on the. Well, I'll let John explain it actually, but he'd probably say it better than me because he's got better hands-on knowledge of it.
Well, I think it's probably worth mentioning as well, Jed, that the really nice thing about this particular project. Let me take a step back. So we do have a sort of semi-automated, it is effectively an automated groundwater forecasting service that we currently provide. That's BGS. Which is a national service, and that feeds into the Flood Forecasting Centre, which is kind of a body that brings together forecasts of flooding of all different types, and it issues these sort of guidance documents to emergency responders called flood guidance statements. So we have a kind of national picture, if you like, of groundwater flooding and groundwater forecasting, although it's by no means fully national. It's kind of sort of dotted about a little bit, so we don't have complete coverage of the country. But the really nice thing about this project is, I think, the link between the forecast and the actual impact that it's having on people's lives. And we certainly don't have that at the moment in our current sort of capability. We can take a step back and say, that area looks like it's a bit more susceptible to flooding, or that area looks a bit less susceptible to flooding. But we can't provide very much at the moment that's really useful to the average Joe on the ground living in those flood risk areas. And I think that's where this project, for me, is really, really strong. It's that link between the science, the science that, we do a lot of the science at BGS, but it's the link between the science and all the clever kind of forecasting techie stuff and the people that are actually impacted by this. And I think that's what I see as a kind of key strength of this work.
Yeah, 100%. And from chatting to the team that are on it, and I think it's quite interesting and applicable to other early warning systems. So it's probably worth talking about. So my understanding of it is around, so you've got some numbers around like what the flooding levels look like and when warnings should come out, etc. But then there's the reality of what that is actually like in the community, and those on the ground have a much better idea of what the levels should be like. Is that correct? Is that what, and I think where that's applicable, I mean, it'd be good if you can expand on that, but where that's interesting and applicable is really all kind of weather alerting, all kind of emergency alerting, where there's a lot of generic stuff that covers large areas because of risk. And you want to make sure, you've got to ensure you cover everyone, and it's better to cover everyone than miss someone. So therefore you get these really generic kind of warnings, which actually lowers the value in them, because you're getting constantly warned about something that doesn't happen. You then tune out. So I think what you guys are doing at community level is super, super interesting, and is probably the future of this. But it'd be good to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, no, and I think that is a difference with what we're doing, Duncan. So the concept is, as well as really zooming in as to where the warning applies. So, John was describing the kind of broad scale alerts that go out, which are useful to professional partners. I've sat in that role. I've sat in kind of silver command centres in the middle of floods and worked at that strategic level with emergency partners, and you do need those kind of warnings and that kind of data. It's necessary and it's good. But this is really zooming into kind of street level, saying this is what we're expecting. And then further than that, if that community has been working with us and got a flood plan together for the community, it will say, and here's the actions from your flood plan you should be taking at this point in time. So it's really, really drilling down to like specific actions that have not come from us. They've come from the community, right? So the community should write their own flood plan. We can help them with that. That's what we're there for. But we don't know what, like you say, we don't know exactly what it's like for them or what they might be able to do to help themselves. Is it, well, there's a whole range of actions you can take from start to finish with a flood to help yourself and your neighbours and your community, and I think that's perhaps the other thing that I'm really optimistic about, is that it will hopefully bring people together who live near each other to help each other. Because in the end, government can do, well, not so much these days. We can do a little bit, but once you get a large scale, widespread flooding event, everything's stretched extremely, extremely thinly, and you have to really prioritise what can be done from, a response side on the government. So then it does fall back to communities to help themselves. So if they've already got a plan together to say, right, when water gets to this level, this is what we can do together, or, so-and-so needs a bit of extra help with this, or we need to move these, it could be things like, moving animals out of fields, moving vehicles from one place to another. These are the kind of early actions you might take before it gets anywhere near anyone's home, for example. When it then becomes a different thing, it's turning on, if you've got pumps, maybe you've got a pump that protects your property and your neighbours. Maybe you need to turn these on quite a way in advance, actually. So that's the other thing with our system, because groundwater is more predictable and is slower rising than, a heavy storm and the response you get. You can give people lead time and good warning time. That's what we're aiming for here.
Yeah, super interesting. One of the things that you mentioned that I'm interested in understanding a bit more is when you talked about the funding, and the funding to allow you to experiment a bit more. What's changed that has allowed that? Because that is fairly unusual.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's been driven by a couple of things. So, as a country, England, and I'm talking England here because it is focused on England, this programme, we spend something like £1 billion a year on, no, it's not billion a year, it's $1 billion over 5 years on flood defence, if you like. There's more traditional, let's build a scheme, let's try and protect people. So flood risk management and coastal erosion, it's about £1 billion over 5 years. And that has, there's, when you work in that industry and when you work on these schemes, you're very limited with what you can do with that. The system is set up to really to protect property, and there's an overriding target of reducing the number of properties and businesses and so on and homes, taking them out of the floodplain or reducing their flood risk. Now that's a really important thing to do, and everyone would agree with that, but it really limits you as well as to what you can do. So just to give you an example, something else we're doing on my project, there's been some really interesting research over the last few years around mental health and the impacts flooding has on mental health. So if you got flooded in the 2 years that follow that time period, you'd be 7 times more likely to experience anxiety, 5 times more likely to suffer from depression, and you'd have a 25% chance of developing PTSD. I mean, this is serious impact on people. But the way the funding system is set up, myself, who works for a flood authority, if we wanted to apply for funding to do something specifically to help with that, so how can we reduce that? Is there something we can do with the NHS, with public health, to try and help following a flood or before a flood to reduce the mental health impacts? You absolutely cannot get funding for that under the current system, because we're not going to be taking anyone's home or building out of the floodplain. So, and that's just one example, really, of how that it's narrowly funneled the funding at the moment. So this is recognised, and the innovation programme there's 25 projects like mine across the country looking at different issues and different all over the place, and trying to say, how about we do something differently here? How about we, generally community-led as well, that's an overriding principle, is right. How about we work with community, see what comes out of us all sitting around together and talking about the problems and coming up with something different that isn't just building flood defences. It isn't just putting in barriers on the Thames and so all this, the traditional stuff. It's not saying don't do that. We need to do that as well, but let's try and do something different here. So that's the basis of the funding, and it is a little bit remarkable. And it's really exciting to work with, and you can see what we're doing here on this little flood warning. But being able to go off the .gov website, for example, we're building our own portal with you guys, which is better than we could anything put on .gov, because you're quite limited. You've got a really strict thing you've got to follow there. Again, for good reasons, but it does stifle new ideas, doesn't it, when you've got a very, very tight policy and process on how things have to be done. So it's a great government programme, and if you're part of it like we are, it's a fantastic thing to work on.
Yeah. And much needed, really. I mean, just to bring back in the sort of climate change narrative, we kind of know what there is a sort of broad picture of what's going to happen to the climate, and we're more and more likely to see wetter winters. And for groundwater flooding in particular, that's a massive issue, because it's that winter rainfall that really drives a lot of the groundwater flood events that we see. So if we're seeing more rainfall in the winter, the chances are we're going to see these groundwater floods happen more frequently and potentially more widespread as well in the future. So it's really important we get this kind of these kind of projects in place now to set up these sort of response actions, if you like, ways we can actually deal with it, mitigating actions that communities can really engage with, so that let's cut to the chase, so that they're prepared for what they might potentially face more frequently in the future.
Yeah, interesting. And just going on from that, so how do you see the project? So at the moment, it's going to go into certain communities. How do you see what's the process of you testing the results of it, the impact of it, and only, I guess, if it's a workable and it improves, how do you see that progressing from that point?
Well, it's a good question, Duncan. I think we are working with 9 communities. That's what the starting point is across the Chilterns. And there are a range of communities in terms of their size, their location, the type of flooding they experience, and also in terms of how engaged they are. So, to give you some extremes, we've got somewhere like the Pang Valley, where they've got a very, very active, very well organised flood group. They've even done their own schemes on the ground, and they're fully engaged with us and across a wider range of issues. And then you've got at the other end of the scale, and it's quite rural. And then at the other end of the scale, we're looking at Luton, where, as far as we can see, there isn't a flood action group at all. The awareness of groundwater flooding as an issue there is right down the bottom. And even getting an inroads into start talking to people there has been quite difficult for us. So obviously the learning we'll hopefully get out of these 2 scenarios is, how do you do this going forward? Because if we want to roll this flood warning service out, and assuming it's successful, and I'm very confident it will be, we've got leading people like the BGS and Jacob and yourselves working on this as a project. The risk of it not being good and not being wanted, I think, is very, very low. And you can see that already from the initial kind of work we've done with communities. So it is what they want. People do want this service. But then it's, how do you roll this out wider? Yeah. How do we get other areas to take it up? And, where does the funding come from that in long term, and who owns the system? These are the big questions that remain, which we are looking at. Ideally, you'd want to see this done as a national service at national level alongside the other flood warning services. But the complication with that at the moment is that groundwater flooding has been kind of hived off and put as a responsibility of local authorities. The local authorities can't all individually run a groundwater flood warning service. There's 140, 150 local authorities in the country, of which how many have groundwater flooding issues? Again, not really known at this point. The data's not there, but it's going to be a good number. So it would make sense to do it nationally, but at the moment, because there isn't the funding in place, there isn't the policy or the legislation that says this should be done nationally, it can't be. So there's a kind of long-term aim for me and for my project to try and get that changed ultimately, so that there is a policy decision or whatever it takes to have this kind of service done with something like what we're doing here. And I think we are kind of doing the cutting edge here in terms of flood warning. I don't think there'll be much better systems out there than what we develop here. That it's focused on groundwater, but it could be other sources of flooding in the future. We want to really set a precedent of this is how well you can do this if you work with people and deliver what they want and what they need. Yeah, complicated answer to that one, and I think it's a big question we have on overhanging the project. And when the funding finishes in 3 years' time, what happens then, right? We really want to make sure there is a plan in place to make sure this keeps going forward.
I think that's key, right? It's understanding where do you need to get to get to the end goal. Where do we need to be in 3 years' time? Like what results do we need to see? What engagement do we need to see? What actions and outputs? That's always the tricky part. But once at least I think we're definitely as an organisation much more attuned to understanding the funding and the models, because all these things live and die by the funding, right? So one of the things that would be interesting to chat around is just around, obviously we love technology, we love implementing technology for good. Just interested in where you've seen technology being implemented or you see new technology that's potentially being needed. We talked about, obviously it's hard to talk about technology today without talking about AI. It's increasingly touching more and more points that touch technology. Interesting to hear from you guys what experience you've had of that, what you see, what you think of the landscape, good and bad.
Yeah. Before we go down the AI rabbit hole, let's do something a bit more broader. So I guess one other interesting bit on the project is use of drones. Again, fairly high profile. So what we are doing, I might tell you a little anecdote actually of how it started. So a good friend of mine that I go cycling with, we had a finished bike ride and went for a pint, and we were chatting a bit about work. I was telling him, I've got this new project looking at groundwater, and he was like, groundwater, eh? Well, actually, I'm researching some drones that I think can measure groundwater. And my friend's a captain in the army. He happened to be in the R&D department at the time. And he's like, but we have a chat about this actually at work. I was like, okay. And then, sort of 2-3 years on now, we are working with the same supplier that basically developed these. What the army wanted is an all singing, all dancing drone that will essentially gather every bit of information possible that you would need if you turned up somewhere and you wanted to build a bridge over a river to basically carry tanks, right? So to get somewhere, you can say, there's a river up ahead, send the drone off, it'll survey it, and it will gather everything like, what the river's doing, what the vegetation's like, how much loading the banks will take. I forget the other things on there. There's like about 6-7 crazy sensors on it. But the one that caught a friend of mine's eye and ear was the ground penetrating radar, which measures where the water table is essentially. And we're like, maybe we could use that to gather groundwater data. So, at the moment you've got boreholes in some bits of the country, like across the Chilterns, there's loads of boreholes, but they've all been put in to measure it in terms of resources. So basically when it's getting too low, so when the water table is too low and you say, we need to stop removing water from that, turn the pumps off, etc. It's not about flooding, it's the opposite use. And they're not always where you want them. So, and they're only points, right? So you don't get the surface data in between because it's not straight across. The water table is complicated by what the geology is like underground, which is not straightforward and it's not uniform. So we're like, okay, so we've had this drone out. We've done a few test runs, got some data back. Yeah, and we're going to try and refine it, see if this is a viable idea. I mean, if it is, it'll give us kind of data on a scale that we've just never seen before. But there's also a lot of difficulty around it. It's not a straightforward thing. So the stuff that comes back from the sensor is not always entirely clear what is the water table and what isn't, right? So a lot of the work is going to be on how you interpret the data that comes back, and can you improve the quality of the data, things like how kind of flight patterns you need, what kind of heights do you need to be, and all this sort of stuff. And also, is it better in certain types of geology than others? Do the soils affect it? It gets quite complicated when you start looking at it all. So that's going on at the moment, which is quite a novel use of drones.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like, I don't think it's something you would automatically kind of, when you said drones, I was like, what? How's that going to work? That's ridiculously fascinating. Like you say, these things always have, when you get down to it, gets more and more complicated. What kind of areas can you cover with drones? Have you looked at that yet?
So that's the slight issue. So with the size of drone at the moment that we've got, which is basically we're still using the Army's drone, which is like, it's the width of a car, and
wow.
But it's also crazy. Like you could fly it the other side of the world from your laptop. It's one of those. It's a bit unnerving, if you're honest. But like the licensing restrictions to use it in England are quite tight. So you can't really fly it over people because of the size, although it does have things like a parachute. If the drone fails, it won't fall. It's got various safety things, and you've got to be able to keep it in visual sight. So although you don't actually fly it, you program it. You say, right, I want it to fly over this field here, and it will go up and go, get all data, come back down. It's a bit mad. And also they are kind of, when the drones are this size, they are a little bit intimidating. They've got like 4 big, I don't know the words, propellers. The noise. So you don't want to do it over cattle either, for example. So it's, although you could, if it was free from restriction, do a very large area very fast. Essentially, you've got to find empty bits of land, and then you've got to get permission of the person who owns the land. Again, it's all doable and it is achievable. It does need a lot of work to it. It's not straightforward. So you've really got to think, which data do we really need, and where's this going to be most useful in terms of effort? So going back to flooding, right? So if you've got an area that's really susceptible to flooding and your data for that area is poor in terms of maybe what your modeling's like, or maybe maybe there's no boreholes in that area. Okay, so this could be really, really useful in terms of that. But what you won't be able to do is, fly it over Oxford, which is like one of our pilot areas. You can't do. It's no. It's a no. You can't be flying a massive military drone over Oxford. But I'm quite optimistic about it. That we'll find some good applications for it, and I think as well, if we get past the data phase, we'll obviously be able to make. We only need the one sensor on there. The sensor itself's not that big, the radar. So we don't need all the other ones. They're just there as a bonus at the moment. It's like, well, we could have all that data if we wanted to have, but we don't really need it. So, the next phase will be more focused in.
Wow, that's super cutting edge. How have you looked at globally what people are doing, and how does what you're comparing? How does that sit? And I don't even know. I don't know. I'm completely new to this area. It's not something that I had known about because they're not making films like you say about it, right? So knowledge is a little bit less. So what's the global landscape look like for this?
I mean, that's the thing. So empty, I would say. There are groundwater flooding issues around the world. There's quite a bit in America that we're aware of. Ireland we started working with the equivalent of John's organisation over there called Groundwater Survey Ireland, I think it is. And they're really keen to work with us. And we're thinking about setting up an international conference in the future to look at groundwater flooding. It's just because that's never existed as far as I can tell. And it's the same reason all around the world. It's just not in the consciousness. There's a lot of work in terms of supply, and managing groundwater supplies for every use we need to make of water. There's a lot of that, but there isn't on the flooding element. And my feeling is it's underrepresented. So even, the data that we've put together so far is showing that, the level of groundwater flood risk is much, much greater than even someone like me who's been in the industry for 20 odd years. I thought it was just little pocket here, little pocket there, because that's been the narrative, if you like, in the industry. It just affects a few people here and there. And I don't think that's true, actually, is what we're finding. And hopefully, that will be another output from our work, is that we'll have that data, so we'll be able to say this is the scale of the problem. Because if you can't say that to start with, how do you even, going back to the funding question, how do you pull in the funding if you can't put a number on these things? You need numbers, you need data. It's fundamental, isn't it, to make decisions.
And it's super exciting. You are on the edge, right? And you are treading new ground and using new techniques to kind of set that. We saw this kind of thing with the US. They've obviously got National Weather Services. They have these cat feeds that give you all of these warning systems, just in a set format, really. We used to be an XML format, but the coverage was really good in the States. And then there was a couple of other areas that had good coverage. I think Japan was one. And then past that point, no one really had any standards. And this is all like early warning, whether that's tsunamis or hurricanes or whatever it might be, or flooding or fires. It's absolutely patchy. And that's almost it's almost the foundations that you need to build to get this. There's quite a lot of work to do. So it's reminiscent of when they were moving out into other territories and trying to standardize format. So, because obviously if everyone's got everything in the same format, then you can build systems to kind of read it, digest it, and share it. So it's super, super interesting. Wow. Well, chaps, absolutely fascinating talking to you both. It is a really interesting area, just not an area I think many people have spent much time in. It's interesting what you talked about around climate change, certainly this country getting a lot wetter. You can see this becoming more and more of an issue than it's been previously. So certainly knowing when communities, the whole being prepared and early warning systems is, being prepared, right? Making sure what to do, limiting the damage, having some idea of what is coming, is coming, helps build more resilient teams, right? More resilient communities and organizations. So I think it's really fascinating. It's definitely a project that we are really enjoying working on. And I think the localized element, apart from the drones, which are super sexy, the localized element is I think the bit we're really super interested in. I think a lot of other of these kind of early warning systems, I think, could learn a huge amount from. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your time. Also, be great to for us to chat once the projects are out on the ground and we've got some community stuff, because it'd be good to talk around that in a really open way. What's been good about that? What's worked in certain areas? What hasn't really worked in certain areas? Where's the data? Where are the data gaps? How are the drones getting on? All of those kind of things would be really good. But yeah, been amazing to talk to you guys. Thank you so much for your time. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.